with the Odyssey, which is credited to have been created by a man named Homer. Now, when Homer lived, as you learned in your videos and your notes previously, there was no written alphabet. And so this story was originally told orally, right? So Homer, this great storyteller known as a minstrel or a bard, would have wandered into different towns, and the people would hear of his coming, and they knew he was a great storyteller. So let's say at 7 o'clock that evening, they would all arrive at some town hall area to listen to the first night's installment of the story of the Odyssey. Now, these people would have already been familiar with the story of the Trojan War, which is kind of what comes before this story, the Odyssey. So it is because of a man named Odysseus, who's the one that created or came up with the idea of the wooden horse, that the Greeks were able to sack the city of Troy. Okay, so this story, the Odyssey, is going to be the story of Odysseus's journey home, back to his Greek home of Ithaca. Now, you would think that that journey would just be get back in your ship and sail back to Ithaca. But unfortunately, Odysseus's journey ends up taking 10 years because he gets stopped and stalled in his journey by different Greek mythological forces. So we're going to be basically reading an adventure story, okay? So I'm Homer. I'm going to enter into a town. I've got all these townspeople, you guys sitting at home watching and listening to this, right? I've got all of you sitting there and I'm like getting a little nervous. So I'm going to start by having a prayer, okay? Asking for help in telling my story. Now, the Greeks, right, were a group of people who worshiped many gods, right? And so they would pray to the god or goddess who would help them with storytelling. And in this case, Homer prayed to the Muse, the Muse were a group of 9 daughters, all right, of Zeus, and they were the ones who inspired the arts. And that's what you'll see here that I have in the that I have here italicized, okay? Homer opens with a prayer asking the Muse, Zeus's 9 daughters who inspire the arts, to help him sing his tale or story. Notice how Homer gives his listeners hints about how his story is to end. Very similar to Romeo and Juliet with the prologue, right? In that prologue with Romeo and Juliet, at the very beginning of the play, you learn that the 2 main characters are going to die, okay? So very similarly, this prayer is going to foreshadow some stuff that happens within this story, okay? So bow your heads. Here is Homer's prayer. I'm going to stop after each stanza to kind of explain what happened in that specific part, just so you don't get lost, all right? Sing in me, Muse, and through me tell the story of that man skilled in all ways of contending, the wanderer, harried for years on end after he plundered the stronghold on the proud height of Troy. So I'm asking the Muse to help me tell a story about Odysseus, who's a great fighter who's been wandering lost for many years after he took down the city of Troy with his creation of the Trojan horse. Okay, moving on to the second stanza. He, of course, here is Odysseus. Remember, I'm still praying as Homer. He saw the townlands and learned the minds of many distant men and weathered many bitter nights and days in his deep heart at sea, while he fought only to save his life and to bring his shipmates home. Okay, explanation. So he's sailing with his surviving shipmates, right? So whoever came over from Ithaca to help in this war, help the Greeks battle the Trojans, they're now on the ship, multiple ships in his fleet actually, headed back to Ithaca. And here Homer lets us in on the fact that he traveled all over on his way home, right? He visited different towns. He met a lot of different people. He was out at sea for many nights and days, 10 years, as I've told you. And the only goal that he had was to get himself, of course, and the shipmates, those of his comrades who have survived, back home to Ithaca. That was his goal. I have to get myself and my shipmates home. Okay, moving on. But not by will nor valor could he save them, for their own recklessness destroyed them all. So there, great foreshadowing. What happened? What'd you just find out? Odysseus did everything he could to save his shipmates, but what happened? Their own recklessness destroyed them all. So there you find out that all of his shipmates are going to die on this journey home. None of them, the shipmates that is, are going to make it back to Ithaca. Okay. Why? What happened to them? Children and fools they killed and feasted on the cattle of Lord Helios, the sun, and he who moves all day through heaven took from their eyes the dawn of their return. So we find out here that Odysseus' shipmates all are killed by Lord Helios because they messed with his precious cows. Okay. All right. Last section here. Remember, I'm still praying. Of these adventures, Muse, daughters of Zeus, tell us in our time. Help me lift the great song again. Begin when all the rest who left behind them headlong death in battle or at sea had long ago returned. So we're going to begin when all the other Greek soldiers had returned back to their homes, while Odysseus still hungered for his home and wife. He's still out on the sea searching for his way home. Well, what held him up? Here's some hints to that. Her ladyship Calypso clung to him in her sea-hollowed caves, and when long years and seasons wheeling brought around that point of time ordained for him to make his passage homeward, trials and dangers even so attended him, even in Ithaca, near those he loved. So there we find out that, yes, folks, Odysseus does make it back to Ithaca. But when he makes it back to his home island of Ithaca, he has to deal with trials and dangers even there. He doesn't get this great Greek homecoming that probably many of the other war heroes got. He comes back to different obstacles and dangers. Yet all the gods had pitied Lord Odysseus, all but Poseidon, raging cold and rough against the brave king, till he came ashore at last on his own land. Okay, so that's the end of the prayer, or at least the portion of the prayer that I'm going to make you responsible for. So there at the very end, the last 4 lines or so, you learn that Odysseus did have the pity of all of the gods, or a lot of the gods, many of the gods, except for Poseidon. Okay, Poseidon did not like him, and he caused him tons of trouble. So as an active reader and listener in this tale, you should be like, well, why didn't Poseidon like him? What did Odysseus do to Poseidon to get his wrath? All right, we will find that out in our next installment of the Odyssey. You are going to have questions, so if you would, go ahead and click over on the assignment sheet, which you will also find in today's folder on Schoology. Just a few questions to kind of make sure you're following along with this prayer portion, the tell the story portion of the Odyssey. All right. If you have any questions, email me. I hope you have a great day.